So, uh, welcome to Yerushalayim. Welcome to Makos. Makos is a masechta that most of us have seen in our life because it was one of the masechtas that your kids force you to learn, because somewhere along the line they taught masechta Makos. Um, the connection between it we'll really appreciate now because we just did masechta Sanhedrin, and primarily the first parak deals with what we call Eidim Zaymimim. So the parsha, the parsha of in the Torah is in Devarim, and Devarim, and it discusses people who come, they testify against an individual. Literally, kiyakim eit chomas beish lanos b'sara v'amdu shnei anashim asher lehem hariv l'fnei Hashem l'fnei hakahanim hashreiftim Mashiach b'yom lahem v'darshu hashreiftim. And the shayftim, they go ahead, hativ. Hine 8 shekel ha'ed, shekel anav achiv. And basisim like hashazamam lasas la'achiv ubiata romikedecha. So there is a difference between edim zoymimim and regular edis. So if two people come and say that Harry killed, and two people come and say Harry did not kill, that's called edis mukcheshes. That's edis that goes ahead and they weaken each other. That's not Eidim Zaymimim. Eidim Zaymimim, the second pair of Eidim, are not testifying at all on what the first Eidim say. They're saying that you were with us on that day, and you said Eidus that this happened, but that day you were with us. So therefore, they're not makish what they said. They said you were with us. So how could you say that? We didn't see anything. You were with us. We believe the second pair. According to Rishonim, one pair, that's the chiddush of Eidim Zaymimim, that we believe the second pair versus the first pair. Now, the chiddush of Eidim Zaymimim is the punishment. You do to them kasha zamam like they plan to do to their brother. That's vasism. You do to them what they plan to do to their brother. So if they plan to kill him, they get killed. Not only they get killed the same way as they wanted to kill the person. If they say this person was Machal Shabbos and he's Chayiv Skila, they would get Skila. They said this person killed, they would go ahead and get Hereg. They would get Hereg. There is an exception, and that's on Mishnah, and we'll see that in a minute. Yesoid of Eidim Zaymim is Vasis Kasha Zamam Lasles, to do, but not if it's done. In other words, if they went ahead and they testified that Harry killed, and Harry is executed, two people come along and say afterwards, Imanu Yusem, you were with us, right? They don't get killed. La'asais, what they plan to do, v'loi asa, but not what it was done, right? It has to be what they plan to do, v'loi asa, but not that was carried out, right? It was famous Ramban. These guys are in Zaymim. This guy's dead. He goes, Hashem has a way. The guy who's dead deserves to be dead. He just brought it about in that way. It's a famous Ramban, fellas. The guy who, Harry, in my name, Harry's dead because Harry is Nishkan Gut Mensch. And therefore Hashem brought it about that way. But it's a Gezeres HaKos, they don't get killed. Now, they will be taken care of by God. Again, the question always is, what can Bezdin Shalmata do? What can Bezdin Shalmata do? Okay. Now, an important Nakud of Eidim Zaymimim that we discussed in Masechta Sanhedrin was the concept of Eidish She'ata Yochol Hazima. In other words, Eidis is a very, 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 very powerful tool. If two Eidim come along and say it's nighttime, it's nighttime. You could kill somebody. We saw how important human life is. That if you kill someone without Eidim, but Bezdin saw you, they'd put you in the kippah and they would burst your stomach open. We said it's one of the Heichet Timses of what? Not carrying out the Arba Mises Bezdin, yet you put the guy and you kill him. Why? Because we don't want a murderer among us. So we see the chashivas of human life. And in this Masechta, in the second parak, we're going to discuss someone who kills B'shoigeg and the setting up of Ari Miklat as one of the things that Moshe did. Even in Moshe's lifetime, there were Ari Miklat set up because of the chashivas of human life. So to kill somebody, this is a big thing. In order to go ahead and support our belief on their monis and edis is they know that if they're lying, the capacity, the possibility exists that they may be caught in their lie. Why?
Oh,
By two other Edom saying Yimanu Hu Yisem.
I'm
And
on.
therefore,
I
if
mean,
they're
it's
willing to
Daf
go
Yomi.
ahead,
Everything okay?
now it is. If they're willing to go ahead, what? If they're willing to go ahead and testify, it must be this substance to the testimony. Why? Because look, they're putting themselves out in the line, out on a limb. Therefore, if the edis is eno tiyachal azima, we don't accept the edis. We saw that in Masechta Sanhedrin, that you have to have the capacity to edis to go ahead, man, and kill the edim. Okay, so that's so again. There's so much stuff that you're familiar with. We're going to do the best we can. Okay, welcome everybody, and it's a pleasure to see everybody. And just as we finish Masech Sanhedrin, we should finish Masech Makos and continue our quest and our journey through Shas. Hi, Penny, how are you? Says the Mishnah. Ketzad, Eidim Nasim Zaymimim. How do you make Eidim Zaymimim? How do you make Eidim Zaymimim? Now, it's a very modern thing because you're beginning Masechta. Ketzad is always how, guys, how what? There has to be a clause before you say how. It has to be, Ketzad is, it's going on something. In other words, how can you begin, if you begin at second base? How can you begin at second base without mentioning first base? When you say Ketzad Masan Zoymimim, you're saying, well, what are you going on? And Bes Hashem will see in the Gemara exactly what it is. So Rashi says, guys, right away, the Gemara Mefarish Ma'ik Omar. What exactly are you saying? Because it makes no sense. Okay, in seventh grade it makes sense because it's not a problem. But when you learn a little bit, it makes sense. In other words, I remember the question. Okay, Ketzad, so big deal. You know, now you understand it. The has to be going on something. Ketzad Nasim Zaymimim. Me'idim anu bi'ish ploini. We testify. Shu ben gerusha ben chalutza. We say, Rashi says that his mother in front of us was divorced, and therefore, and her husband, and she married a kayin, and therefore he is a chalal, and he can't do the avodah. He's mechul, or he's ben chalutza, or the father married a woman who had received chalitza. Guys, gerusha is the raisa, chalutza is the rabbanon. Be aware. A lot of people don't know it. Chalutza is the rabbanon, but nonetheless, he's a chalal. Ein oimrim yaseh ben gerush ben chalutza. Now it has to be that the person they're testifying on is a kayin. If the person did not testify as a kayin, of course, ben gerush ben chalutza is if it's a Yisrael or a Levi, it's not a non-entity. So it has to be speaking that what they're kahanim, right? If they're kahanim, in that case, right, we don't say that you make them ben gerush ben chalutza, ella loika arbayim. So it must be that they're testifying against the kayin, and it must be that they're kahanim, right? It must be their kahanim. Rashi, ein oimrim im huzmu. If they were made zomim by someone saying Gemara Yisem, veheim kahanim, and both of the Edim are kahanim. Yasas, we don't say Yasas and Megrusha v'chalutza kayin bakasha zamam. Elasayfikas aboyim, they get 40 malchus, actually 39. With one mafarish time, and the Gemara will explain the reason. So, the first case of the Mishnah asks, "How do you make Edim Zaymimim?" And the Mishnah promptly gives you a case of not of Edim Zaymimim. to make the question more difficult. You ask how do you make Edim Zaymimim? And then you give a case of not Edim Zaymimim. Like it's not. Again, next case, Eloika. We say this person killed b'shoigeg, and if a person is chayiv b'shoigeg, he killed the nefesh b'shoigeg, he has to go to galus. Einoimim yigalus at tachtav. If they're found to be zoymim, and we don't say they go to galus, Eloika abayim, they get 40 malchus. Okay, before we begin the Gemara, I think I'd love to do the Taisus, because after Sanhedrin and after Mahakdama of eight that you need this Shef Yalzima, how in the world do you accept to say this? Freg Taisus Abamba. First Taisus, guys. Tema, Avunda. Kivin de im Huzmu. Since these Eidim Zaymimim who testify, this guy's the Ben Gerusha, since if you find them to be Zaymimim, Ein Nasim Ben Gerusha v'chalutza, they're not Ben Gerusha v'chalutza. Im Kain gam b'shelo hu yizmu eich yasu al piem Ben Gerusha the hachi hu ha'emes v'mai ha'havili edis yet yachla zima ve'ein ze edis. In other words, one of the asaidis of Eidus that we spoke out is you have to go ahead and be Mekayim Kasha Zamam. Since you keep being Mekayim Kasha Zamam, this is Eidus Shi'ata Yochel Azima. And that is not Eidus at all. It's a great Kasha. It's a great Kasha. Now, V'yesh Leiman, Kivin Deloikim, Have Kasha Zamam. Have Shapa Ata Yochel Azima. Good? So in other words, based upon my Hakdama, let's fit in what's the aside of Eidus. There's got to be a fear factor. There's got to be something over my head to know if I'm willing to put my life, in this case, my body on the line. Memela, that's enough to say my Eidus gives me ne'emanis. In other words, the reason Eidus Shechel Azima is not Eidus is because there's no fear factor for me whatsoever. There is no fear factor for me whatsoever. I don't have to worry about anything. As a matter of fact, Rabbi Kiva Eig over here, in a famous tshuva, in Kuf Ayin Aleph says, what about you say Eidus Kiddush HaChodesh? It's not Shayach Hazam over there. So how can you accept them as Eidim? Okay, anyways, so look, and it's again, Frag Taisa Kasha, how in the world could you go ahead and accept this Eidus? It's not Yachal Azima. Well, I'll tell you why. Since they're getting something good, it's not what they wanted to do to passel this guy, but nonetheless, they're not getting off scot-free. They're going to get gehakt. They're going to get geschlugged. Memela, there is a fear because there's something they have to worry about. Ken Zayin, that's the Hezbollah of Toisus Eretz. Since you're going ahead and getting Golus, that's a Kiyum of Kasha Zamam. It's not exactly what they wanted to do. But if the aside of Kasha of Eidus Yachal Azima is to believe the aid, there has to be a fear that you're going to get punished. Over here, Malchus would be enough of a punishment. That's enough to go ahead and buttress and support the Eidus. That perhaps is the Hezber of Taisus. Vikasha says Taisus. Them Cain, my kama perikoya boitkin, gabe ede naira hamurasa. The iu loy makdalinon, they don't get killed. The kivin the inu loy makdali, since right? Mishum sheyachol loyma laasa al bayla banu, v'avilei ede sheyat yachol azima, u'may kama v'mikol malkum loikin. Over there, the Gemara is discussing. In other words, we don't want to kill her. We just want to ask her in the baila. So since they can say that, right? If they're getting malchus, it's a kima kasha zanam, right? Over there, but again, they're getting punished. V'yeshleimar the hasam kivin sheboin lechayva misay v'zomu v'laharagas and nefesh loy mekayim kasha zanam v'malchus. Their malchus is different because they want to do something more. Over here, they don't want to do something. They don't want to kill the person. You want to kill the person, malchus is not enough. In other words, if you're it's very geschmack with the Hezbollah guys. If you're out to kill a guy, and you don't have to worry about dying, that's enough of what? Of not Eidus Shechel Azima. I'll get gestraf and I'll get geschlacht. Good, I'll get geschlacht, but I won't die. In other words, it's very good. So the Oid Yeshleima, skip down a little bit. The Gabe Eidus ben Gerush v'chalutza loy chashinen klal ba'ata Yachal Azima. You don't need it at all. The mehechen nafkalon the being an Eidus Shechel Azima because zamam. But mukach bigamara the kasha zamam loy nichtav l'gabe Eidus the ben Gerusha like koi klal aleha b'shum shad sheba oilam. Now this is the second teretz. This throws out the window everything I just told you. What is he saying? Where do you learn that Eidus Shechel Azima from? You learn that from kasha zamam. Memela by ben Gerusha ben Chalutza, where it's not Shayach Kasha Zamam, you don't need Eidus Shechel Azima. So what? So you could say whatever you want? In other words, this basically is saying it's totally different than what we bet the Hezbollah. In other words, two different terutzim. Over here, what does it mean? Since you can't make it since you can't go ahead and make him a ben Gerusha ben Chalutza, so Mamela, you don't need Eidus Shechel Azima. Since you can't, in other words, your Eidus is not going to lead to anything. It's only lead to Malchus. You don't need Eidus Shechel Azima. So you have two terutzim in Taisvis. The first teretz is that Malchus is a kiyum kasha zamam. The second teretz is you don't need Eidus Shechel Azima. You don't need Eidus Shechel Azima. Okay, I think it's a little bit of more than I wanted to get into. I just wanted to introduce this concept of there has to be, you have to pay the piper. You have to pay the piper. There has to be someone, you have to answer to something. You can't just go ahead and say this. But for the mechanics of the Gemara, what do we say? We start off the Gemara, Ketzad Eid Nasim Zaymimim. Then we give two examples of Eidis that are not Eidis Hazama. One is Ben Gerush Ben Chalutza, and two is Golas. You testify a guy killed B'Shogeg, you don't go to Golas. The Gemara right away questions. Fred the Gemara. HaKetzad Eina Eidim Nasim Zaymimim Bolei. First of all, you ask, how do you make Eidim Zaymimim? And then you give a case of not Zaymimim. So what does that mean? It should say what? So one question is, the doesn't make any sense. In addition, says the Gemara, in addition, midiktani l'kamon, when you learn later on, aval amru lahem, heich atem eidim, how does that hey? How could you go ahead and testify? That day, Ata used to be one of Makam Pliny, Hari Elu Zaymimim, right? So Kesed Mas Zaymim is Mefurish Mishnah. What are you asking? You're asking what? How do you make Edim Zaymimim? Look at Daf Hey, and you'll know how you make Edim Zaymimim, Imanu or Yisem. So it's two kashas. One, you're starting to say, how do you make Edim Zaymimim? And then you give a case of how you don't make Zaymimim. And secondly, you go ahead and you have an answer to your question. How do you make Edim Zaymimim? Look in Daf Hey, it's a Mishnah, right? How could you have testified, Imanu Yusem? You were in Yerushalayim and they were in Hoboken. I mean, how can you testify? That doesn't work. So those are two kashas. And for the Gemara, Tana Hasam Koi. The Tana is going on Masechta Sanhedrin. Kol Zaymimim Makdimim Loisei Misa. Every 8 Zaymim, you're going to go ahead and bring to the Misa that you wanted to go ahead but they wanted to do. Makdimim, you'll be Makdim Loisei Misa. So they want to give skila. They want to give sreifa. Chutz mi Zaymim Bas Kayin u'Bayala. With the exception of a Bas Kayin and those who Bayala. Meaning, they're not going to get the same Misa. She'ein Makdisim Loisei Misa. They wanted to give a streifa, they're not going to get streifa. So, Ketzad, we're going on that. Meaning, in Masechta Sanhedrin, it discusses Eidim Zaymimim. And what does it say about Eidim Zaymimim? That every Eid Zaymim gets exactly what they wanted to do, with the exception of what? A Baskayin Ubayala. In other words, they wanted to give a streifa. They said this married woman, this Nesua, this woman, again, Rashi is Meduya, guys, not an Arusa. Arusa Bas Koyim, we said in Masechta Sanhedrin, gets skila. So it has to be, Rashi says, one word, beautiful. Nesua, says Rashi, right? Chutz Mizayim Bas Koyim, Nesua. She has to be in the act of Erison. She had to be living with a husband. It has to be Nesua, not Erison. Okay? Remember that sugya, fellas. What does an Arusa get? A Bas Koyin. Does she stay as the same as a Bas Yisrael? A Naira Murasa gets skila. And we said that we paskin that only Sreif is said by an Asua. She goes down in a level. She goes from skila to Sreifa, right? Because normally a Nesua would get what? Chenek. A woman, guys, a regular Nesua gets chenek. This Nesua is getting Sreifa. Good? So if you testify against this woman to give a sreifa, you're not getting sreifa. What you are getting yet, that's a separate limud. What you're getting yet is what you wanted to give her boil, which is chenek. How do you know the boil gets chenek? Because it says what? How do you know he gets chenek? Right? We'll see Rashi in a second. Okay. So Naigeya, the teretz over here. Ketzay Masam Zaymimim. How do you make Eidim Zaymimim? Right? Says the Gemara. What do you mean? What's Eidim Zaymimim? What are you going on? Says the Gemara. We're going to Masechet Sanhedrin. Right? What part of Masechet Sanhedrin? The part that says that a Bas Koyin Sreifa, you will not go ahead, and if you testify and you found to be Zaymimim, you won't get Sreifa. Continues the Gemara. However, v'yesh Eidim Zaymim Macherim. There are other Eidim Zaymim. Shein oisabem din hazama kalika. You don't do the din of hazama at all. Ella Malkus Abayim. They get Malkus Abayim. Ketzad. Me'idim anu bish plan shuch ben gerushim and chalutza. Einar miyasa ben gerushim and chalutza tachtav eloloikas abayim. You get 40 malchus. So now we have a teretz. We have a teretz to the kasha. What's the teretz to the kasha? Ketzad and nasim zaymim. Fred the Gemara kasha. Who mentioned anything about Eidim zaymim? We don't know Ketzad. What's going on? It says the Gemara we're going to Masechta Sanhedrin. You give a case of Eina Eidim nasim zaymim. The Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin also gives a case of you're not doing hazama. What's the case of not doing hazama? The case of Bas Kain Ubayla. She's getting sreifa, they're getting chenek. In addition, we have another case where you also don't do hazama. The case of Ben Gerushim and Chalutza. So therefore, we went through it. Okay, that's the whole Gemara. It's going on Masechta Sanhedrin, right? It's going on Masechta Sanhedrin. Masechta Sanhedrin, you're giving a case of Zaymimim that don't get punished with what they wanted to do, but they do get punished. And now we have a case of Zaymim don't get punished at what they wanted to do. Guys, over there they wanted to kill her, right? They're getting killed. They're just not getting killed the way they wanted to kill. Over here, they wanted to make a Ben Gerusha. They don't want to get Malchus. So this is not Mekayim Hazama Kol Ika. You're not Mekayim Hazama at all. Okay, let's fill in a few of the pieces of information. First of all, what was the last parak in Masechta Sanhedrin? Chelik. Where's your connection? This was the parak before Chelik, guys. Rashi. Says Rashi, Hasam Koi, Tana Hasam Koi, Misanhedrin Solik. We're leaving off with Sanhedrin. Ditnan Bishelhi Eluheina Nachnakim. We learn at the end of the parak called, these are the ones that get chenek, the Hu Siyuma de Sanhedrin, which is the last parak. It's the same as Sanhedrin. Guys, look at Mishnayos. The last parak is Eluheina Nachnakim. They put it out of order, but really the last parak is Elohin and Achmachim. And at the end it says this case of Bas Koyim. The Yesh Zaymimim shenishtanu b'miktsas midin hazama. There are Zaymimim that mishtanu, they changed midin hazama, kidiktani. Kol ha-Zaymimim makdim eloisem amisa, klaimar, ein lehem litzpais misa acheres, you don't have to look for another misa. Whatever they wanted to do to the nidan, you go ahead and do to them. However, nesua, again, very meduya, guys, not an arusa. Arusa is getting skila, but the nesua. They get chenek k'yafin and hasam. Okay, here's the limud. He b'sreifa, vein boila b'sreifa. El v'chenek. It says that she gets sreifa. Right? What's the pasuk? Ubas koyim ki sachal is nice esavia. Esavia he mechaleles, guys. Esavia him is chalelas beish tisaref. So it says he, that he, she gets reifa. So that's what's the miyit? He v'lo yizaymemecha. She but not hazaymemem. El b'chenek. Now, good guys. One second. So good, they don't get streifa, but why do they get chenek? Very good. El b'chenek kishar eishasish, like any other eishasish adulter. V'azaymem mashkivim lemisa shechayivim es aboyel. Okay, now, so so guys, outside, you've established that the Zaymimim, don't get Sreifa. Why do they get Chenek? Why did they get Chenek? In other words, any adulterer gets Chenek. So why is that? So no, she gets Sreifa, but the guy I said the wrong pshat, she gets Sreifa, but he doesn't get sreifa, meaning the boil doesn't get sreifa. He gets chenek. Why do they, now question, why did the Zaymim get him and not her? Okay, continues Rashi. What he planned to do to his brother and not his sister. Okay, so very good. So We have all the information now. Okay, just let's chazer riba. Let's chazer riba. Kate said eight Nesson Zoimim is going on Masech the Sanhedrin. The last parak says no, it's not really the last parak. Chelik was put there, they switched around. The last sugya, what does the sugya say over there? There are Zoimimim. There are Zoimimim who don't get the Misa. What are they? Bas Kayin, because it says she gets Sreifa, but the guy with her doesn't get Sreifa. What does he get? He gets Chenek like any other adulterer. Why do Edom Zoimim get Chenek versus Sreifa? Because it says Kasha Zomam Lasais La'ochiv and Midashin La'ochiv Lo'ilachosai. And now on that, the Gemara, our Mishnah is saying, on that, our Mishnah is saying, in addition to that case where you're dying, but not the exact death, we have a case of Edom Zoimim where you're getting punished, but not the same punishment, right? They want to make a Ben Gerush Mechalutza, and you're going to go ahead and get Malchus. So how the kasher is, how do you know that? How do you know you don't make a Ben Gerush Mechalutza? Minani Milif, back in the Gemara. How do you know that you don't make a Ben Gerush Mechalutza? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Damakra, Vasisim Loi Kasha Zamam Loi, but he wanted to do the hymn V'loi Lazaroi. So two people come along and they say Harry is what? Harry is a Ben Gerushim and Chalutza. Good. Now Harry has children. You pass on Harry's children because the children of a Chol are Chalalim. So it says what they plan to do to Harry and not to his children. So since you can't go ahead and affect his children, right? Since you can't affect his children, Memela, we can't go ahead and accept it loy v'loy lazaroi, and we'll give him Malchus. But the Gemara will learn that. How do you know you get Malchus? Okay. In other words, there's two shlofim over here. A, how do you know the din? And B, how do you know the application is Malchus? So how do you know you don't make it if they're kahanim? How do you know to make them Ben Gerushim and Chalutza? Guys, why? Because what did they want to do to Harry? They wanted to make Harry, right? They wanted to make Harry loy to him, loy lazaroi. Okay. Therefore, you don't do to them what they wanted to do. Loy to him, to Harry, v'loy lazaroi. Vasisim loy kasha zamam, lasais la'achiv, right? Loy v'loy lazaroi. Feg the Gemara v'liv salinu l'didei. Let's passel him v'loy liv lazaroi. Okay, the Edom Zaymimim will say they're psulim, and the kids are good. What do they want to do? They wanted to passel my kids. So you know what the following. They wanted to passel Harry. Good. So they're puzzle, but the Edom Zaymim's kids are good. Why not? It's great. Says Gemara, because 1 second, they wanted to passel Harry and Harry's kids. If you're going to just passel them and not their kids, that's not kasha zamam. Again, kasha zamam is a chiddush. You do to them what they wanted to do. They wanted to passel a Harry and Harry's children. Good. So says the Gemara, since they loyal only to Harry and not Harry's children. Fed the Gemara, so let's do to them, but let's do it and passel them and don't passel the children. Says the Gemara, you can't do that because they wanted to passel the children. Okay, that's the svara. That is the real svara. Now, Bar Pada is going to introduce a difficult kal v'chaymer. And listen to this kal v'chaymer, guys. Madach, a person who makes chalolim, he himself is not in the ballpark, he's good. If Harry's father married the Ben Gerusha, Harry's father is good. So he wanted, right, the one who makes chalolim, but he himself is not a chalol. These Eidim that wanted to make chalolim and didn't, you should make them a chalolim. Madach, a real case of a person who creates chalolim. He himself is not a chalol. These Eidim who wanted to make chalolim but didn't, okay. The problem with that is, guys, you'll never, ever therefore have Eidim Zaymimim. Because as we spoke out in the Hakdama, kasha zamam v'loy kasha asa. It always has to be what they wanted to do, but not what in fact was done. If it was done, you don't make Eidim Zaymimim. So says the Gemara, says Bar Parda Omar, Kal v'chomer. It's a Kal v'chomer that we shouldn't make them a Ben Gerush Ben Chalutza. Umaha Machalel, the father of Harry, who made chalolim, Eina Mischalel, he himself does not become a chalol. Habola chalel, Eidim that come to make chalolim, v'loy chilel, but they're not successful in making chalolim because they were found out to be Eidim Zayimim, Einay Din is not a Kalvachaymer, Shalay Yischalo. Guys, you got it? Maskav lo Ravina im Kain, but Latoiris Eidim Zayimim. You're going to go ahead and throw out the window all the parsha of Eidim Zayimim. It won't exist anymore. You're going to throw it out the window, Amid Beis. Okay, we're going with Rashi's Pshat, guys. Uma has-cycle. Eidim, that what? They came to go ahead and kill someone. And they do kill someone. They said the guys B'chal Shabbos, and before they became Zayimim, they killed. Uma has-cycle. Einay niskal. They don't get killed. Habo lisko, someone who comes to go ahead and right? Einay sakol. V'loy sakol. Einay din shlo yisakol. Guys, what's the din in this case? Look at me. What's the din in this case? Two Eidim come and say that Harry was B'chal Shabbos. Now Harry's killed. What's the din? These Eidim don't get killed. Kasha Zomam, like they wanted to do, like Kasha Us, and not what was done. So therefore, it's a Kal V'chomer. Madoch, where they're successful in killing Harry. They don't get killed. Kal V'chomer, in a case where they're not successful in killing Harry, they shouldn't get killed. But what is Eidim Zayimim? You wanted to kill Harry, Kasha Zomam, last we're going to go do to you. So in other words, if you're going to darshan that Kal V'chomer, you'll never ever have a case of Eidim Zayimim. You'll never ever have a case. The case of Eidim Zayimim is where you want to do something and it wasn't done. Your Kal V'chomer is Madoch, where you did something, you don't suffer. Certainly where you don't do something, you shouldn't suffer. But Eidim Zayimim Gufa is where you don't do something that you suffer. So if Barpadas Kal V'chomer is the Kal V'chomer, says Ravina, you've thrown out the window one of Eidim Zayimim. Ella, what do you have to say? Says the Gemara, Mechavarta, it's clear, Kiddushakmina Meikar, it's the Gezeres HaKosiv, Vasisam Kashazamam Lasas La'achiv, Loi V'loi Lizaroi. It's Gezeres HaKosiv. That's it. That's the reason. Okay, now, so we've established that what? That you can't, by Ben Gerush Mechalutza, because of you pasalish children, we can't do it. Why do you get Malchus? How do you know you get Malchus? How do you know you get Malchus? I want to know. The Gemara wants to know. How do you know you get Malchus? How do you know you don't go to Golus? Right? So the first, we know you don't go to get Ben Gerush Ben Chalutza, because it says, it says the next din in the Mishnah, we say that the person killed B'shaygeg, he doesn't go to Golus. Minani Mili, how do you know he doesn't go to Golus? So I'm Reish Lakish, the Amakra, the Pasuk says, Hu Yonos al Achas Haharim. Okay, the Pasuk here is, the Ish Yavai Asher Yavai Esereo Biyar, he comes to defend this forest, Lach the Veitzim to Hakoltz, Benitcha Yoda Begarzin, it slips off the axe, Luchres Eitz, Vinosh Labarzim and Eitz, Umatzas Reyeu, it slips out. We have a Machlokes in the Gemara, what exactly with this axe, or with the iron of the axe, Umeis, Hu Yonos al Achas Haharim Ha'ele V'chai. By the way, Rabbi Avi is a Numa Drega, guys. If you notice, he's on the airplane with his little thing around his neck. He's not in a car. Numa Drega, just for the record, we have to point that out. So now, anyway, says the Gemara Geshmak, guys. Okay, so it says that. So now it says that who Yanus he will run al achas ha'arim hu v'lei zaymim. He runs and not the zaymim. So guys, it's two gezeres hakasiv. Loy v'loy lezaro. You don't make him a ben garush men chalutza. Who Yanus he runs and not what? Not the zaymim. The Gemara now is going to say it's a svara. Rabbi Yochanan Makal v'chaymer umahush asa ma'isa b'mezid. If he would kill b'mezid, ein a goyla, hein shelo yasa ma'isa b'mezid. They who killed b'shoigeg, ein a din shelo yiglu. Right now, these person didn't do him right. Didn't do a ma'isa at all. Hein shelo yasa ma'isa. They just did a dibur. Right. Ein a din shelo, says the Gemara. V'inay senes. Hu shasa ma'isa b'mezid loy ligli. You know why he doesn't go to galus? Ki heichid lo havei kapara. That he shouldn't get a kapara. In other words, we're viewing Golus as a kapara for him, right? The reason he doesn't go is because he did it b'mezid, so he has to get killed. Hein, they the Adim shlayosam ma'aser b'mesid. They didn't do a ma'aser b'mesid. They said just that a dibur nami legally. They should go to galus kapara. Since they were more lenient, then therefore your svara of Rabbi Yochanan to say they should not go to galus is a svara explaining they should go to galus. What's your svara? A person who kills Ritzayach b'mesid doesn't go to galus. They who didn't go ahead and do a Maisa, of course they should go to Golis. Says Rabbi. The reason he doesn't go to Golis is because he needs a. It's not, we're not going to give him a kapara. But they who just did a Maisa should go to Golis. Ella, that's your svar is not correct. Ella mechavarta kedavei shlokish is gzeir sakosiv hu yonas alachas harim hu v'lo yizaminim. Okay, now good. So we've established the two cases of the Mishnah. One, loy v'loy lezaroi, ben gerushim and chalutza doesn't, make the Edom zoymim ben gerushim and chalutza, even though they're kahanim. And Sveitans, at the case of Golis, they don't go to Golis, who's hu yanos. Ama'ula, remez le'edom zoymim min ha-Torah. We have a remez to Edom zoymim min ha-Torah. Minayin. Fred the Gemara, remez le'edom zoymim, v'kasiv asisim le'kasha zamam. Remez usually means an allusion to. It's not openly stated. It's usually an allusion to. It's not openly stated. Here we have an open state. The pasuk state azay. It's not a remez. The pasuk says so. El remez leidim zayim shaloikin min ha-Torah. Meaning, guys, two guys testified that this guy eat chazav. What did they get? Malchus, because the person who eats chazav gets malchus. So I don't need this din, what we're about to do now, to tell me that. That's kasha zamam. You know what the malchus is over here? The malchus of ben grushim and chalutza, where it doesn't say anything. In other words, there's a two-step process over here. I know they don't make a kam ben grushim and chalutza. I know they don't go to galus. But how do I know you get malchus? In other words, it's the punishment. How do you know you get malchus? Now it can't be discussing again, as I said, where the kasha zomam is in a malchus tikadin. They ate chaza, they wore shatnez. In other words, fashtetzach. That is kasha zomam. The remez over here is the case where you're not going to be in kasha zomam. How do you know you get malchus? I like that's what the Gemara is discussing. Okay. So amula remez leim zayim min ha-Torah minayin remez leim zayim v'ksiv asik kasha zomam. El remez leim zayim shaloikim min ha-Torah. This case of ben gurush men chalutza. How do you know they get malchus? Dichsiv, the pasuk says. V'tzdiku es et tzaddik, and they'll be matzdik at tzaddik. V'ershiu es rasha, and they'll find the rasha wicked. V'hoyaim ben akas rasha, and it will be when you hit the rasha. Okay, now let's say this is speaking about dayanim, fellas. It's speaking about dayanim. So you have two cases. You're matzdik at tzaddik, and you find the rasha, and you get malchus. If it's speaking about dayanim, what does the being matzdik the tzaddik have to do with the rasha getting malchus? I have two separate court cases over here. Again, if it's speaking about guys, if it's speaking about a dayan, so l'chayra, let's break it down. There's one case where you matzdik the tzaddik. In other words, you find this guy righteous. You have a second case where you find the guy a rasha, and when you find the guy a rasha, he's getting malchus. So what does the first clause of Itzdiku es tzaddik have to do with the second guy getting malchus? So guess what? It's not speaking about the dayan. It's speaking about Edom. And you know what the Edom did? They took a tzaddik and they made him into a rasha. Comes along two other Edom. What are they doing? They're being matzdik the tzaddik. They're being matzdik the person who was a tzaddik in the first place. The Yeshua as a rasha, and they're making the Edom into Rishayim. V'hoyim bin Hakois, then those Edom are getting malchus. It's speaking about the Edom. It's not speaking about dayanim. Let's see it inside. V'hoyim bin Hakois a rasha. Mishum v'tzdiku es a tzaddik, because Bezdin found them righteous. For Yeshua as a rasha, and Bezdin found this person to be a rasha. Vayim ben Hakas a rasha? Ella, it's not speaking about dayanim. Who's it speaking about? Edom she'Yeshua as a tzaddik. Edom that found the tzaddik into a rasha. For also Edom achrina comes along other Edom v'tzdiku as a tzaddik, and now they restore this tzaddik as a tzaddik. The meikara. V'shavinu lahane, and he made those Eidim, who made him into a Rasha, they made them into Rishayim. V'hayim ben hakas a Rasha. And therefore, this is the case that you know where a person where you can't be Mekayim Kasher Zamam, you're going to go ahead and give Malchus. Fred the Gemara, the Tepik Leimelei Sane B'riachet Shaker, you shouldn't testify against your man, it's a lav. Why do I need the pasuk of its Tzadikus et Tzadik V'Shias Rasha? I should have it from Mat V'lei Sane. And for the Gemara, we should have lav shein b'maisa, because Eidus is a lav shein b'maisa, and the chol lav shein b'maisa ain't like in a love. Guys, we're going to see later on in the third parak. With the V'hoyi ben hakas of Russia is right next to the parsha like saksim sor b'dishay. You should muzzle an axe. So just like muzzling an axe is an action, so too V'hoyi ben hakas is an action. It has to be. We juxtaposed it together. When do you go ahead and get malchus? Similarly, saksim. Like saksim, you're doing an action. So maybe you can't learn it from Isana because it says over here that Eidus is not considered a Maisa. Something can specify a Maisa. Okay. Anyway. Tanrabana. Okay, now new clause. Dalid varim nem ubedim zaymen. 4 dinim asebe edim zaymen. 1. Ein asim ben gerush men chalutza. 2. Vein goylin lari miklat. 3. Vein mishalman esa koifer. We'll see what that means. And 4, Veinim Chorim be'Eved Ivri, they're not sold as an Eved Ivri. Mishum Rabbi Akiva Amar, Rabbi Akiva says a 5th din. Afei Mishalman al Piatzman, they don't play if they admit. Okay, now. Ein Asin ben Gerushim ben Chalutza, Kidamar, and we just said, Basisim loy kasha zamam, right? Loy v'loy l'zaray. Vein goylin lorei miklot, Kidamaron, hu Yonus, hu v'loy zamim. Vein Mishalman is a kaifer. What's kaifer? You have a shara muid, shor stoys 3, kill 3 people. Baruch Greenfield asked me, how's he ever get a case of a muad? The first thing he ever asked me. He said, if you have a Tom gets killed right away, how do you have a case of a muad? And I answered him, he ran away, right? I think the first thing I asked you is, do you like football, right? That's the first thing I asked you. Okay, anyway. So here you have it, guys, Geshmak. So this Adam say that this person's shor gore 3 times, and he's chayiv kaifer. They don't pay kaifer. Good. Why not? Now, outside, what is kaifer? Is kaifer a din in mamanis, or is it din in a kapara? In other words, my shor, I let this murderous shor, kill 3 people, I should die. Elawat, I'll pay kaifer, and kaifer will be a kapara for me. In other words, it's a din in the goof of the body of the person. Or no, do we say kaifer is a din in like any other tashlumim, like paying kefel, paying dalit vehei? Kaifer is another momentous dikachiv. It's not a yoredeya dikachiv. It's not a din. It's a cheshem mishpat dikadin. In other words, that's the way to explain it. It's a din issa veheta. I need a kapara. Well, no, it's mammon. So the Gemara is going to suggest that this din that we just said is that they don't pay kaifer is because kaifer is a kapara, and since they're a kanas. We're going to say Edom Zayim is a kanas according to Rabbi Akiva. So they're not bat kapara, and therefore they don't pay kaifer. Says the Gemara. They mishalm as a kaifer. Sarvi kufra kapara, because this brisa holds kaifer is a kapara. V'hani lav b'nei kapara ninu, and these people are not b'nei kapara. Rashi says kufra kapara right before it gets wide. L'chapar al zeh shaharag. It's the kapara on this one they killed. Shari es adam, the person who allowed his shor to kill. V'hani lav b'nei kapara ninu shlei harag shari adam. They're what? Their shor did not kill anybody. So therefore what? They're not going to pay. They're not going to pay. Okay, back in the Gemara. Man Tana Kufr Kapara. Who's the Tana who holds Kufr's Kapara? Rav Chisda is Rabbi Yishmael ben Aishel Rabbi Yochanan ben Breikehi. It's Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Breike. The Tanya, it says in the parsha of Kaifer, it says, "Im Kaifer Yushas Alav, if Kaifer be placed on him, V'nasan Pidyan Nafshay, he'll go ahead and pay the pidyon of his nefesh. K'chol asher Yushas Alav, V'nasan Pidyan Nafshay, that's the main nizik. The main nizik. That's the Tanakama. So fellas, the nizik is the one that was killed. I'm paying the price for the one that's killed. I don't need a kapara. I have to go ahead and make up to his yarshim the fact that my shor took the life of that individual. So whatever he's worth, I'll pay. That's the Tanakama who says kufr is mamoina. Rabbi Shmuel ben Oshel Berachem Masik. He pays for himself. Why does he have to pay for himself? Because he needs a kapara. My laba kibifli. The masava kufra mamayna. The Tanakamu says that you pay according to what the worth of the one that was killed holds. That's it's mammon. Umasava and Rabbi Shmuel ben Rebbe holds kufra kapara. Therefore, he's paying his worth. Guys, he's alive and well. But why? So why are you paying his worth? Because he needs a kapara. So l'chayra, our brisa that says kufra kapara is going according to Rabbi Yishmael ben Ashel and not the Tanakama. Amra Papa loy. The Kuli Alma kufra kapara. Everyone holds kufra is the kapara. Even the Tanakama. So why are you paying the main nizik? When you evaluate how much kaifer is for the kapara, you evaluate the amount that the person killed was. Perish. In other words, kufr is the kapara. And therefore, the brisa that says that if you don't pay kaifer is according to everybody. It's not only according to Rabbi Shmuel ben Ashel. It's according to everybody. Because the Tana of the brisa who argues on Rabbi Shmuel also holds kufr is the kapara. He just says the amount for the kapara is the worth of the person killed and not the person that is paying. Good. What's the reason? My time with Rabbanon. What's the reason? So it says there's two psukim. It says kashayushas alav, and it says by the mei v'lodais. If you have two people fighting and they hit a pregnant woman and she miscarries as a result, you're going to pay the price of what the baby was worth. So it's the main nizik. And it says the word is kashayushas alav, yushas and yashas. So nema hashta hashasa lamata, and nema hashas lamayla. Ma lahalam by the mei v'lodais is bedenizik. Afkan bedenizik. So it's a gezeres akosiv, but he also kufis a kapara. Rabbi Shmuel says, "V'nasam pidyon nafshay ksiv." That's the one that one who's paying. Rabbanan in pidyon nafshay ksiv miyuki shaminan b'denisik shaminan. Okay, so just briefly. We have three cases so far: begrush ben chalutza, golus, and kaifer. And the reason the Edom Zayim are not paying kaifer is kufr is a kapara. The final case, but not they don't. You're not going to sell them as an evidivri. Guys, when you sell someone as an evidivri, is when he steals and he doesn't have what to pay up. When he steals and he doesn't have what to pay up, you're going to go ahead and sell him as an evidivri. So Edom Zoymimim will never be sold as an evidivri. Right? Hani mili, you know when they're not sold? Since the person they testified again that he stole has money. The migu the iulay nizdavna, since he wouldn't be sold, inunami lay nizdavna, we wouldn't sell them. Aval hecha the less leila day, but when he doesn't have, the one they testified stole does not have, and therefore he would be sold. Afagav the isla they do, even though they have the money to pay, they didn't do, then nizdavna, they'll be sold. So Rav Hamnuna wants to qualify this brisa. Guys, the fourth case of the brisa. They never sold as an evidivri. That's when they both have money. But if the guy that they testified against doesn't have money, then they'll be sold. Even though they have money, they'll be sold. So it says. So we have over here. Who's this? Okay. It says Gemara v'leim rulei. Let the Eidim say to him, "Ant havi lecha." If you would have had money, me having mistavnis, you wouldn't have been sold. And non nami, we who do have money, like mistavna, nina, we shouldn't be sold. So that can't be the svara. In other words, that can't be the svara that you're not. As long as there's one money, either to the one they testified against or the Eidim, then they won't be sold. Ela savra abnun lemeimar hani mili. When aren't they sold? Hecha de islay oile de day oile de aval hecha de leslay, where there's no money. Loyally day, the guy testified has no money. For loyally do and not them. No, they're both penniless. The guy who they testified against, and the Edom are penniless. Then misnamna they'll be sold. So Rav Nuna wants to qualify when the Brisa said they never sold as an evidivri. 1 second, it only depends. When aren't they sold? When one has money, either them or him. But if neither has money, then they'll be sold. On that, Amalei Rava, no. Says Rava, it says v'nimcha bigneva. So the pasuk says imzorcha Hashem shalav damim loy the pasuk machteres shalom shalim im ein loy v'nimcha b'neva. So if he doesn't have, then it'll be sold. Amrachmona bigneva so, velo bizomimo. Bigneva so, when he doesn't have any money, right? When bigneva so, him, velo yizomimim. Even if they don't have money, it's a gezeir sakasa. Okay, so let's go over what we saw so far today, and we'll call it a day. Well, for me, an evening. Anyway, so we began the Masechta that how do you make Eidim Zoymimim? You didn't know what was going on. Then you give a case of not Eidim Zoymimim. So we have one teretz to both kashas. We're not going on the case of Eidim Zoymim. We know what Eidim Zoymim are. We have a Mishnah on Daf Vada and Daf Hey. Imanu Yisem. We know what Eidim Zoymim is. We're going on the Gemara at the end of Masechta Sanhedrin, Eloi Nechlakim being the last perik versus Chelek. And there's a case over there where it says, you know what? Not every Eidim Zoymim are exact. There's a case that's not exact. What's the case that's not exact? That is the case of Sreifa, Bas Kohen getting Sreifa. A married woman who is a Bas Kohen, if she's an adulteress, right, she doesn't get chenek, she gets skila, he gets chenek. Eidim who testify against that case, said the Gemara in Sanhedrin, they will get chenek, and therefore not Sreifa. Okay, she gets Sreifa and not what, and not him. So therefore, on that case where it says where you are getting Misa, but not the Misa that you wanted to give, we're going on that. You know what? There's another case. You know what that other case is? Our Mishnah. Guess what? They testify this guy's a Ben Grush Ben Chalutza. They testify this guy's going to Gullus. No, neither one. We're going on that. Beautiful. So we're not. That's the connection to that Masechta, and that's why we open the. It also explains why you open the Masechta, guys. If you should begin Makos with the last perik. Elohim Aloikim. These are the ones that get Malchus. If it's called Masechta Makos, you should begin with the third perik. It's a mitzvah. Yes, the kasha. Why don't you begin with the third perik? And the answer is because we're going on that Masechta. It's a beautiful segue from one to the other. Now, why? So now, why don't you make a Ben Gerush Ben Chalutza? Loi, Basisim Loi, Loi Lazaro. If you're going to passel them, the Eidim are going to passel the kids also. And they want to passel both. Okay. Now, how come he doesn't go to Gullus? Who Yonas? He goes to Gullus, the murderer, and they don't go. How do you know you get Malchus? If it's Tikus, it's Tzadik, Veshiras, Russia, Ben Hakas, Russia, it's speaking about Eidim Zayim. It can't be speaking about Dayanim. If it's speaking about the Yonim, the Tztiku has nothing to do with the Rishiyus in zero, right? So therefore, must be speaking about Eidim that were they made a Russia. Comes along with Tztikus, it's Tzadik, the Matzdik, the Russia that these guys made in the first place. Then the Veshiras, Russia, these Eidim, maybe Rishayim, Bahayim, Ben Hakas, Russia, you're going to give them Malchus. Now the Gemara Yesloy Sanes, the Gemara Labin Shemaisa. Then the Gemara brings a Brisa. There's four cases of we don't do Eidim Zaymim. The first case being Ben Grush Ben Chalutza, we did that. Second case being Gullus, we did that. Third case being what? Of Koifer. Koifer is kapara. They don't need the kapara. But Machloikis, Koifer minor, Koifer minor. No, everyone knows Koifer is kapara. It's not going on only according to Rabbi Shmuel ben Meshach ben Yochanan. It's going to everybody. And the Machloikis there is concerning what? How to go ahead and evaluate how much the kapara is. Do you go according to Niz or go to Masik? The fourth case was the case of what? Of Eved Ivri. Who Nimchav Gneva. So he gets sold, but not the Zaymim. The fifth case is Rabbi Akiva, and we'll see that Be'ez Hashem tomorrow. Thank you for listening.
Dove wants to know